in Italian order. So today we will talk about the health status of aquaculture species in the scenario of climate changes. Oops. So we have two sections here. The first section is general on aquaculture, and here are depicted the main outlines: composition and growth of global aquaculture production, aquaculture in the environment, sustainable aquaculture, and aquaculture with global changes in the ocean. So we'll start first defining what aquaculture is, because aquaculture is the cultivation and harvesting of aquatic organisms, including not just fish, but also mollusks, crustaceans, and also aquatic plants and seaweeds, for different purposes, for food, research, conservation, also extraction and isolation of bioactive principles, and so on. This practice in Mediterranean dates back to the Romans, around 500 before Christ, because the Romans used to farm oysters and fish in Mediterranean lagoons. And this practice is an equivalent in water to agriculture, involving the rearing of aquatic species to supplement the natural population and meet human demands for food. Here is a recent review, a 20-year retrospective of global aquaculture. You can see here in the map the growth in aquaculture production between 2006 and 2016 for countries with highest production. And on the left, we can see in tons the increase in production of these different species between 1997 and 2017. So the total production is increasing from the late 90s. And here you can see more or less the contribution of fish, mainly freshwater, algae, mollusks, and also marine fish in the lower panel, crustacean and other species. Aquaculture became well integrated in the global food system around the 2000. And from then on, we know already that aquaculture industry has significantly impacted the environment, both positively and negatively. Because the first intention of fish farming, for example, which is the most widespread aquaculture, was to increase food security for human health. But also fish farming showed to have different environmental problems as a result of this activity. The main environmental problems coming from the impact of aquaculture are the release of waste and chemicals in the waterways, the spread of disease to wild fish population, because we will see that crowding of individuals in aquaculture plants can lead to spread of disease, and also for the destruction at the beginning, not now, of natural habitats for the construction of aquaculture facilities. So to address these main concerns we have very clear in mind now, it is essential to implement sustainable aquaculture practice that can minimize the harm to the environment, at the same time maximizing the benefits for human consumption and economic development. Because the demand for blue food, what is blue food? Any food from ocean, rivers, and lakes, is increasing steadily at a global scale. But as you can see here, the global production from 1950 to predicting 2050, we can see that fishery is stable, is not increasing, because there is overfishing worldwide that led to the depletion of natural population. In contrast, you can see that the aquaculture production in million tons is steadily increasing, especially from the 2000s. So given the depletion of wild aquatic resources and ecosystems, aquaculture will play an increasingly important role in meeting the global demand for food at a global level. Aquaculture implies a rearing of different species, different production systems, and different value chains. Today, we will not focus on production system, which is a technical issue, on economic issues, but we will focus on the health of different species, the most aquaculture worldwide. Despite the increasing activities worldwide and the increasing production of food from aquaculture, not all growth, you know very well from this course, that is not sustainable. So it's vital to consider all the opportunities and trade-off of aquaculture development to guarantee truly sustainable growth. So we will see that if aquaculture is developed responsibly, has the significant potential to meet the food demands of a growing global population, but at the same time be representing an activity which is sustainable, nutritious, and equitable. As you can see here, this is the brochure of a recent meeting with from 2022, the Road to Sustainable Aquaculture. You can find the outcome of this international meeting on the web. I will show you many links with different sources that I utilize for this presentation. But as aquaculture industry is expanding, the sector, we have seen that is facing some problem like environmental degradation, and also for land and freshwater aquaculture, also problem of water scarcity and limited availability of space, not only of land, but also coastal areas. And also high input costs, because building and implementing an aquaculture farm is expensive. So in this general view, sustainable aquaculture can be defined as the aquaculture practice, which focuses on environmental, economic, and social sustainability to improve the overall capacity building and utilize land and sea effectively for the aquaculture section. What do we mean for environmental sustainability? Aquaculture should be eco-friendly. It should not impose any significant disruption to biodiversity. Then there is the economic sustainability, because the practice, sorry, I am meeting a new participant to the Zoom meeting. Economic sustainability implies that the practice should be profitable with good long-term prospects of growth for investments, and also social sustainability, because aquaculture practice must be socially responsible and contribute also to the well-being of the local community, because many aquaculture plants act locally and are on a local scale and have a close contact with the local population. So in general, sustainable aquaculture should deliver nutritious food to a growing world population, create jobs and economic development for coastal and rural communities. And also we'll see sustainable aquaculture will help mitigating climate change. And according to most recent studies, sustainable aquaculture must address some main topics. First of all, animal health and disease resistance, which is the topic we will talk in a second section about. Technologies and production systems to increase efficiency. Diversification of species, because we will see that only few species are grown worldwide. So we are looking for new species that are potentially interesting for aquaculture. Management system, and also new eco-friendly fish and mollusk products with high nutritional value, because we see that fish and mollusks are the most frequent species in aquaculture. Talking about sustainability, of course, I am sure that in this course you will have heard several times on the sustainable development goals of the 2030 agenda. But here there is a scheme connecting aquaculture with direct, indirect, and associated or related implication for different sustainable development goals. The direct effects are on 2 and 3, so eliminating hunger and improving health. Indirect, increasing environmental sustainability of ocean, water, climate, land, through responsible production and consumption. So here is the involvement of all the ecosystem, water and so on. Aquaculture can be associated to SDG 1, 5, 8, and 8, and 10, reducing poverty, achieving gender equality, improving livelihoods, and reducing inequalities. Think about Africa, for example. Freshwater aquaculture in some African countries is crucial in their economic development and can reduce poverty and improve gender equality. Related, in the long term, sustainable aquaculture has the potential to produce energy, adding food production also in cities, not in remote countries, and contribute to development of technology and or various partnerships from local to global in different ways. In May 2021, the European Commission published the new strategy for sustainable aquaculture in Europe. This is linked to the Farm to Fork strategy that recognizes the role of sustainable aquaculture in building sustainable food system. This new strategy is crucial for European aquaculture to grow into a competitive and resilient sector and become a global reference for sustainability by 2030. There is a practical brochure online at this link where you can find the 2 documents in any language. The first is strategic guidelines for a more sustainable and competitive European aquaculture for 2021 to 2030. And the second is a new strategic vision for sustainable aquaculture production and consumption in the European Union. So blue farming within the European Green Deal. There is another organization that contributes to development of aquaculture. This is the European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund, in Italian FEAMP, that is strictly related to Objective 14, Life Below Water, because this is a fund that contributes economically to development of projects that improve food security through the supply of seafood products, the growth of sustainable economy, healthy, safe, sustainably managed seas and oceans. And all these goals are directly related to the goal for achievement. Now we go to the problem of climate changes, because aquaculture, both in land, in coastal areas, and so on, has to face environmental changes. Here, I show you a summary of the most recent report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, Special Report on the Ocean and Cryosphere in a Changing Climate, SROC. And in this report, there are the prediction of main changes related to climate change at a global scale. What are global changes? We know increasing temperature, ice melting, increasing the...
Pieno Mancini.
Sento una voce, ma non so se parla con me. Posso andare avanti? Ok. The increase in sea level, increase in ocean heat content, decrease in pH, ocean acidification, depletion in oxygen reserve in ocean and in all water body, and we will see also the marine heat waves. here graphs, they look complicated, but these are the projection for 2010 and also here for the 2003 on the basis of historical data, experimental data, historical data in green modeled, and here, most important, in blue and pink, the two projected scenarios. The first is in case of low greenhouse gas emission. The pink is in case of high greenhouse gas emission. That is, if we're doing nothing on the gas emission. But we are looking at the main changes that will involve the oceans. This is the global mean surface temperature in the ocean. So this is the best scenario for this year. This is the worst scenario. This means that the global mean surface temperature is going to increase at least of 2 or 3 degrees in the next decades. The same applies to ocean pH, which is decreasing. So here we have two predictions for low acidity. We know that seawater is alkaline, so we can go below or around 8 points pH. Now it's over 8. In the worst scenario, the ocean acidification can go down to 7.5 pH units. Here is the depletion of oxygen, small for the best scenario and important for the worst scenario. And here we will see at the end of this presentation the marine heat wave days. That means days where the temperature shows anomalous increases over the average of the period. Now we know that in the marine environment, warming, so the increase in temperature, and acidification, so the decrease in pH, will represent the two main environmental stress that all marine organisms will be exposed to in the forthcoming years. And we know that, unfortunately, these two changes will occur together at the speed never observed before in the past. So these main environmental perturbations that derive from global climate change can potentially disrupt the functioning of natural ecosystem, but also of aquaculture ecosystem. Sorry. Climate change in the oceans, like warming and acidification, has not just ecological consequences for the environment, but also heavy economic consequences. Because we have to think that a marine ecosystem provides invaluable goods and services. So as the human population is growing, production and consumption of fish and shellfish that derives from normal fishing, which is depleted, and aquaculture represent one of the main sources of support for economic growth in many countries. So climate changes represent a challenge for future food safety, also on land, for agriculture as well, but we are focusing on the aquatic environment. Since these changes can affect the growth and stability of fish, crustacean, and molluscan population due to the impact of environmental stressors and their interaction. And this is underlined also in the last report of the Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO project, which analyzes the impact of climate change on fisheries and aquaculture in different regions of the world. What is the impact of climate changes or in general of environmental changes on aquaculture? Here in the center of these slides, we have the production cycle of fish. We start from fish fry, which are the small embryos that are grown in nurseries. And in this way, we can obtain young individuals. that grow into juveniles, adult juveniles, and then they are fed to become larger and to reach the marketable size. Once they have reached the marketable size, which is different for different species, they are used for reproduction to obtain new seeds and new generation. So here on the left, we can see all the general environmental changes that can affect the aquaculture production cycle, for example, on fish. General decline of resources, habitat destruction, eutrophisation, biotic depletion, different ecological effects, fish disease, gas emission. But all these environmental concerns are due to anthropogenic activities. At the same time, indirectly, anthropogenic activities are contributed to climate changes. And so different aspects of climate change per se can affect the aquaculture production cycle. The dramatic events like cyclones or drought, floods, but in general, global warming, acidification, changes in rainfall, this is important for the sea level, but also for aquaculture inland and estuaries, salinity, and in general, the increase in the sea level. So it's a very complex situation where different factors, all caused directly or indirectly by human activities, can affect aquaculture production. Here is a graph reporting the number of publications on cumulative impact of ocean warming and acidification on fish and shellfish. As you can see from the 2010, there is an increasing study to try to understand which is the impact of the main drivers of global changes on biological resources in the oceans. So from these studies, we now know that combined exposure to environmental stressors, like, for example, warming and acidification, or warming and changing salinity, or whatever, can have a cumulative impact on fish and shellfish and can affect all biological systems from the molecular level to the ecosystem level. Here is the pyramid indicating how growth and survival of individuals is affected, because on the basis of this inverted pyramid, there are all the steps that lead to affecting growth or survival. We start from direct effect on molecules, on DNA and proteins and lipids and so on, affecting different biological functions like the immune system, affecting the physiology, the metabolism, the capacity to tolerate different temperature, affecting the capacity to reproduce. And for example, acidification is very important because many aquaculture species are vertebrates like fish, or have a calcified skeleton like mollusk, for example. And all these changes from molecular level can affect behavioral responses of individuals and also alter prey-predator dynamics. So a very complex issue that concerns all the levels of biological organization. So now we know that warming plus acidification can have a number of effects at different levels of organization in fish and shellfish. So in the most utilized species for aquaculture. But aquaculture can have some positive effects on global warming and in general on changes in climate worldwide. Here is an example of how shellfish farming, this could be mussels, oysters, whatever, and seaweed farming, whatever seaweed is cultivated for food or for any other practical purposes. And here we have 4 points that are related to aquaculture. If aquaculture is followed and organized correctly, can have different benefits that are direct on the environment and can mitigate the effect of climate change. We can go through this quickly. The first effect is to mitigate pollution, because algae, for example, can extract the excess of nitrogen and phosphorus coming, for example, from soaps, detergents, and so on. And if we have in the same place also filtering and feeding shellfish like mollusks, clams, and so on, they filter the water and can decrease the turbidity, increase the clarity of the water. The second point is habitat, because due to human activities, some natural habitats are almost completely destroyed. We will see the case of the oyster, because we know, for example, that about 90% of natural oyster population have been lost all over the world. And if planned in a correct way, some shellfish farming can, of course, replete the natural population, but provide the habitat for other species. For example, can protect young stages of fish and invertebrates, and can support in various ways both fish and macroinvertebrate population, which is also a consequence of point 3, because together or individually, shellfish and seaweed aquaculture can provide a refuge for different types of macrofauna. The fourth consequence can be reduction in total carbon dioxide content in seawater. This is due to the seaweeds and algae, increase the oxygen content of the water, and in general mitigate the changes of water chemistry that occur in consequence of climate change. So if correctly planned, some aquaculture activity can restore or contribute to mitigate the local climate change condition. Of course, this applies to a local scale, not to a global scale. Fish farming, for example, can have multiple positive effects on food and energy exchange, and can have an overall positive effects on food webs, because, for example, fish in cages can be fed with different feeds. They release fecal matter, different types of excreta, different wastes, and this contribute to increase the particulate organic carbon fraction in the water that can be used by filtering or suspension feeders organisms on the bottom, and so on. As I mentioned before, if aquaculture is correctly planned. Now, there are rules and indications for spatial planning to choose the right place for the right type of aquaculture impact. So we won't go through the details in this presentation, but aquaculture can be planned and can be placed in different environments to increase the quality of the environment, to increase the health of natural populations, and to buffer in general, as we just mentioned, the impact of climate changes. Last implication of aquaculture is the relationship between aquaculture and this concept of One Health. Again, probably you already heard of the One Health concept in these lessons. This involves human health, which is, of course, at the top of our interest, but now we are aware that human health cannot be disconnected from animal health and from environmental health, because whatever changes occur in the environment and whatever changes suffer different animals that are grown for providing food to humans influence the human health. Here on the right side, the concept of One Health is connected to, for example, seaweed aquaculture and wildlife aquaculture. So you can see that there are positive and negative interactions between the idea that environment, wildlife, and humans are interconnected, and all actions that can contribute to make a better environment or sustainable environment, or that can provide a condition for optimal growth condition of different species that are utilized for food, have a positive consequence on humans. And this is a concept of from farm to fork that we mentioned in the project of the European Union. So just a very simple take-home message for this section. We know that coastal ecosystems are threatened by coastal pollution, loss of habitats, overfishing, and will face the other threat amplifier of climate change. And we mentioned the main components of climate change that can affect local coastal ecosystem. But when we're done in the right way and in the right places, commercial aquaculture can accelerate the recovery of disturbed ecosystems, in addition to providing food for humans, which is sustainable, and also those that are called green jobs in coastal communities. So all these issues are interconnected and can explain how the concept of sustainable aquaculture is extremely important in protection of the environment and also of human health. Sorry, I'll close the window because it's noisy. So as you can see, the first part is very general, just to introduce you to the concept of aquaculture. In the second session, we will go through the biological aspects of aquaculture, and in particular on aquaculture and animal welfare. First of all, we will go through the main aquaculture species globally at the European level. Then we will focus on the recommendation for welfare of the commonest finfish species in European countries. We will see that for these species that are essentially the sea bass and the sea bram, there are regulation and there are calculations that can allow us to predict risk factors during production system for animal health. We will see briefly the main diseases, sea bass and sea bram, and then the last part of this section will be focused on shellfish. We have to say one thing. I don't know if any of you is collaborating or interested in animal welfare in activities, because we know that, fortunately, for scientific experimentation, but also for utilization of species of the economic interest on land, the concept of animal welfare is now accepted globally. So animals do not have to suffer because we exploit them as food, for example. And so the attention to animal welfare is particularly high in Western countries. But now we know, on the basis of scientific data, when animal welfare can be guaranteed and in what conditions, because there are many studies that are measuring through evaluation of different parameters how animals are, if they are healthy or not healthy, if they suffer or do not suffer. However, despite the huge number of scientific papers published on animal welfare in agriculture, in aquaculture, and so on, these scientific insights are not yet included in aquaculture standards. That means that a farmer, an aquaculture farmer, is not obliged to follow all these indications. However, in general, the need of welfare consideration is now included in the FAO Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries. Of course, the adoption of some precaution and some practice in aquaculture is not dictated by altruism. Sometimes they talk about human treatment of fish. Okay, this is, in my personal opinion, a bit hypocritical. The idea is that if the fish is healthy, the product quality is better, and it reduces the risk of disease, and the propagation of infectious disease in aquaculture leads to the loss of all the production. So we are not often so guided by altruism or humanitarian ideas, but we know if the fish is healthy, also the product is good and it's worth money. Apart from that, we have to admit that there are no recognized standards for animal welfare for about 70% of farmed aquatic species. And I'll show you now some pictures from the review of France in 2021. The title is explicative: Animal Welfare Risk of Global Aquaculture. Here you can see the list of the most common species that are used in aquaculture. As you can see, most are chordata, so vertebrate, finfish, some arthropoda, crustaceans, a great deal of mollusca, essentially bivalves, and then a few other invertebrates. Here is the number of individuals that are reared in different situations. So you can see that the number of fish is very high, the number of crustaceans is very high, the number of mollusca is extremely high. And here in this table, you can see, according to the FAO listing, the main species of fish, the freshwater species, and the marine species. As you can see, they are not very many. So it's 10 species. These represent the most aquaculture species of fish all over the world. But what is of interest in this paper is the analysis on scientific research on welfare. So how many papers are focused on the welfare of species of invertebrates or vertebrates that are utilized in aquaculture. As you can see, for invertebrates, there are no cases of presenting more than 5 publications on this subject. For vertebrates, there are few. Some papers in invertebrates, less than 5, are involved in how evaluating the welfare of the invertebrates. Some more invertebrates. But look at these, no welfare. Most of the studies do not care at all to the welfare of the aquaculture species. This according to the FAO list in 2018. Let's have a look in more detail on the main species cultivated worldwide. According to the State of World Fishery and Aquaculture Report in 2020, we can say that up to 2018, over 600 of aquatic organism species were found across the world. But 600, but only a few species make up of most of the production. For example, 90% of fish production is based only on 27 species. Even fewer species of crustacean, mollusks, and other aquatic animals are found. And here you can see in the Europe, this all over the world. In Europe, here is the production in tons. On top, the mussel, Mytilus, followed by trout, and 2 species of marine fish, the sea bass and the sea bram. And here, in particular, you can see the images of the fish, the European sea bass, Trarchus labrax, and the gilt-head sea bram, Sparus aurata. Then in production tons, they are followed by other bivalves, oyster, carp, oyster, clams, and a bit carp, but the trout for freshwater species in much more produced in greater amounts. When we look at the economic values of these species, it is very high for trout, sea bass, mussels, sea bream, but also compared to production for oyster and of course for tuna. So every time we consider the number of species and the production in ton, we have to have a look at the economic value in euros. Let's go through the welfare recommendation for these two main fish species, marine species, Dicertratus labras, sea bass, and Sparus aurata, sea bream. They are present in all over Europe, from the North Sea to the Mediterranean, but it is the Mediterranean market that dominates the production. In some cases, a single aquaculture plant produces both sea bass and sea bream. But here is the scientific opinion of the EFSA, European Food Safety Authority, on animal welfare aspects of husbandry system for farmed European sea bass and gillhead sea bream. That means that from 2008, we have a regulation, okay? We have indication on how to maintain the animal welfare of these species that are the most widespread in aquaculture in Europe. This scientific opinion is based on scientific data. And on the basis of scientific data, we can give recommendation on how to improve the welfare of fish through different tools. Of course, good housing, good food, good health, and all the opportunity to express the appropriate behavior, because we will see that behavioral observation are very indicative of the welfare of the fish. You can find this document at this link. But how we can guarantee the welfare of these two fish species? We have to take into account different variables. The first is the abiotic factor, so the physicochemical characteristics of the waters where the fish are grown. Temperature, carbon dioxide, oxygen, pH, ammonia, salinity, length of photoperiod, and also the water volume allowed for each individual to avoid overcrowding. Biotic and behavioral factors. Density, there are indication of how many fish of a certain size can be kept in a certain amount of volume of water, because the density affects social interaction and can lead to competitive behavior, aggressive behavior, predation, and so on. Feed, of course, the quality and composition of feed. There are different feed diets. Some are standardized, but there is the market is producing different type of feed to increase the growth and the quality of the product. How food is administered, because it depends on the species, on the size, on the age of the fish. Fasting, we have some fasting starvation period before collecting the fish. And in general, of course, the rearing practices, the cleanness of the plant, selection, confinement, transport, if it's not allowed, but eventual hormonal manipulation, and also mechanical and noise disturbances that can induce stress in the animals. Of course, disease, the spread of pathogens, and we'll look at the final point, the pre-slaughtering and slaughtering practice. Now, on the basis of these factors, this is in Italian because it's taken from an Italian study where the risk factor imposed by each of these variables can be calculated. For example, in this case, the table is valid for sea bass and sea bream, okay? And here in the studies, the recommendation of the EFSA have been applied. Okay, here you can see the rearing practice, so handling disturbances, kind of nets, light intensity, cleanness of the containers, and so on. And it depends if the fish are kept in cages or in big tanks where the circulation of the water is free or there is a recirculation of the water. For feeding, formulation of the feed diet and how the food is kept before utilization, and also adaptation to the distribution system. And you can see we can, according to this regulation, calculate the risk for animal welfare. Pathology, norovirus, so you receive babesiosis and so on, parasites, and we will go briefly through the main cause for disease in fish. And at the end, of course, was first in the previous slide, the quality of the water, temperature, water flux, hypoxia, water exchange, hyperoxia, hypercapnia, decrease in pH, too much oxygen, low temperature, high level of ammonia. And all these factors can contribute to induce predation among the individual, and also very important, crowding, how many individuals are kept in each condition. And this calculation allows to get a final risk score. And this risk score, the higher is the risk score, the higher is the probability that animal welfare is affected in the aquaculture plant. What are the main diseases for sea bass and sea bram in Italy? More or less the same: myxobacteria, vibrios, different parasites, and so on. In general, the transmissible disease in fish, which are called epizoosis, are due to parasites, bacteria, and virus that induce different pathologies. But now we know very well also the mollusk disease. We will go to this later, and also crustacean disease. Now, the presence of these pathogens in each aquaculture plant is monitored by law. Okay, so we have a list of the main potential pathogens for fish, mollusks, and crustaceans to avoid the spread of disease. Pre-slaughtering and slaughtering. I don't know if any of you have ever thought of this, because we are often worried about the way cattle, for example, is kept on the sea, on land, but we never worry about fish. We have a pre-slaughter phase. This means that when the fish have reached the marketable size, they are connected in smaller cages or nets. Some days before the slaughtering, there is a starvation condition to avoid that the gut is too full of food, and also the removal from water, netting with simple nets. This, of course, can lead to a temporary overcrowding. So from the sea to the boat, it's necessary to collect the fishes. And this is a phase that can cause strong stress condition to the fish. Then slaughter. What do we mean slaughter? You know that because in order to have fresh fish, they are collected in nets and then immediately put on ice. This is the slaughter phase, and in the slaughter phase, what happens to the fish? First of all, they are taken out of the water, so they are subjected to asphyxia. They cannot breathe air, so they cannot breathe. And then can be kept in different media at a low temperature: ice slurry and ice flakes. Ice slurry is a mixture of ice and water. Again, during this phase, a fish can take over half an hour, 40 minutes to die. Okay, so during this phase, we impose to the animals as stronger stress, sometimes a stronger stress that any stress we can cause them in the water. And then there is the processing and how the fish is transported and packaged. Here are the calculation of risk factors, again for sea bass and sea bream, during pre-slaughter and slaughter. And you can see here that, for example, fasting, we can choose, the aquaculture farmer can choose according to the species or the type of plants, if before fishing the individual can starve them for a long period, or to have different short repeated periods of starvation. Crowding. Crowding can be a risk factor, depends on the design of the fishing nets. If the collection is too fast, if the water where they are temporarily kept before going on the vessels is not suitable, pH, the temperature, ammonia, and so on, prolonged crowding, and so on. Then we have the moment we take out the animals from the water, and this depends on the length. It depends on if the fishing procedure is manual or mechanical or so on. And you can see that that manual fishing has a low risk factor. Okay. The same, we can calculate the risk score during the slaughter phase. Asphyxia, if we leave the animals to just exposed to the air, the risk score is the maximum. Okay, but another source of asphyxia is the compression. You could put too many fishes together. There is not space enough for them to breathe. Temperature, in general, we put the fish in iced water. The ice slurry corresponds to a mixture of water and ice at a temperature around 2 degrees. And again, here it depends on the crowding in the tanks and the number of animals we kill with this method. The thermic shock with ice has a high risk of asphyxia, because the ice doesn't allow, there is no water, so the animal can't breathe at all, and so the risk is very high. Okay, this just to mention that there are regulations, there are indications, and we can calculate the impact of each factor from the production to the slaughtering of the animals to guarantee or to minimize the animal welfare. We are very far from the optimal condition, but a lot has been done on fish in the, we say, in the last decade. But aquaculture is not just fish. As we can go to the previous graph on the species production in tons and their economic value in euros, we have seen that there are 3 main species of mollusks: mussels, oysters, and clams. They are bivalve mollusks that represent a significant portion of aquaculture production and economic value. What does Europe to deal with the welfare of shellfish? Essentially, this is on the shoulders of local farmers, because shellfish aquaculture is so old, and it has such a long tradition. We've seen that it dates back to the Romans, that local farmers know how to deal to with mussels, oyster, and so on, to facilitate and to maintain the good health condition of the organism, and also to protect and monitor the environment when these animals grow. In general, shellfish aquaculture is represented by small facilities, and the rearing of shellfish is often provided by local population. So the care the farmer utilize is in general sufficient because the farmer know when the environmental conditions are changes and can recognize very easy what is happening in the plant. The problem is that despite this, we have observed in the last decades a huge number of mortality episodes in shellfish hatcheries that are due to both environmental conditions, but also to climate change conditions. So if you're interested in good husbandry practices in shellfish, again, here there is a recent document for the European Union, 2023. But if we look at the problem of bivalve mortalities worldwide, we can take an example that of the European oyster. I don't know if you're keen in eating oyster. I don't, for example, I'm not. But in Europe, the natural population of oyster was represented once by the flat oyster, Oystra edulis. That is called belon in France. And native oyster reefs were once abundant in European seas and were unfortunately affected by overfishing. So we know that by the middle of the 19th centuries, the natural oyster population, flat oyster, Oystra edulis, declined by 95%. Okay, the first reason was overfishing, traditional overfishing, but also the problem was represented by two parasites, Martellia and Bonamia, that invaded the oyster communities in the middle 70s. And these parasites reached Europe just through trade globalization. They were absent in European seas before. These parasites decimated the oyster population. Oysters were not able to combat these parasites. So for this species, we are just a few sites of natural population all over Europe. Now, if you go and buy oysters, you'll buy Ticass, which is the Pacific oyster, which has been utilized to substitute for the natural population of Oystra edulis. And now, Ticass is the most common oyster species aquaculture in Europe. Okay? Because we have to consider that native oyster reefs are considered one of the most threatened and endangered habitats in Europe. The problem is also that these species have also a slow growing rate and slow recruitment. So their success of maintaining the population is easily hampered by environmental factors, for example. Here is the histogram showing the production of Oystra edulis from the 50s to nowadays, more or less. And you can see that there have been periods of dramatic decrease in production. And these changes were attributed to problems of emergence of the parasite Martellia in France, the introduction of sea just in France to substitute for the loss of Ostrea edulis, Bonamiosis emerges in France, and so on. But now you can see that from the middle of the 80s, the French oyster production, France, of course, is the biggest production of oysters in Europe, 98% already in the 80s was represented by sea Ticass. And then, in general, the decline also in production in tons, also for Ticass. What are the drivers of natural oyster population decline? Anthropogenic factors, so the fishing first, habitat lost, but also we saw that pathogens, invasive species, and so on can affect their welfare, and that's also the survival. Of course, water quality and pollution, together with overfishing, have contributed to the decimating this population. Of course, it's extremely sensitive species to any environmental change. But here in this report, you can see the impact on population leading to reduced broodstock, reduced larval input and survival, and also larval settlement and survival. In this view, protection of these organisms during the larval stage is essential to provide recruitment for the new populations. Now, there are different European projects that are devoted to restoration of Ostrea edulis population. Of course, this is important because if we are able to replace native oyster population, this will have an impact, a positive impact on the environment, because filtering oyster will increase water clarity, will increase exchange of food through the food webs, also providing feed for fish. There is also the cultural value, because some communities, especially both in the Mediterranean, but also in the Northern Sea in Europe, were living on oyster fishing. And in general, this will contribute to improved water quality. But this subject is extremely followed by the European Union with grants and organization to provide ecological restoration of oyster edulis. As you can see here, there are just few sites remained in Europe where there is the wild collection of native oysters, some in Ireland, in UK, in France, and so on, and also in Yugoslavia. In other places, actually breeding pond, breed pond, does it mean? That are places where the larvae taken from natural population are reared and grown. This growth system of oysters or general bivalves can be very different. This is an example on a site of oyster seed collection in Italy, and this is one in Ireland. Of course, all the procedures are now well established to guarantee not only the production of food and the economic value, but also to restore the natural populations. So if we could summarize which are the main biological causes of decline in the bivalve population worldwide, we have to consider different aspects, not only those we have considered for Ostrea edulis in particular. Because related to climate changes and pollution, we are observing increased frequency and duration of algal blooms. Many of these algae are toxic and they proliferate along the coast. This, of course, alters the water quality, even if the algae are not toxic, but can be toxic to aquaculture shellfish. In general, in coastal areas where the impact of human population is very high, where the human population density is very high, and when the health system do not work very well, in case of gastroenteritis, influenza, or simply in case of environmental factors, heavy rainfall, there is a microbiological contamination with bacteria and with virus that can contaminate coastal water and so also shellfish. But we now know that in the last decades, main mortality outbreaks in different bivalve populations, not only oysters, but also mussels, clams, and so on, occurred. These were due to the parasites, Martellia and Bonamia, that we underline as the main Ostrea edulis parasites, but they can be parasites also of the Pacific oysters and also other bivalve species. Viruses, for example, for oyster, herpes virus type 1, but these are monitored by local health authorities, and different bacteria, mainly bacteria of the Vibrio species, which are marine bacteria, and then include different species that can be pathogenic to bivalves in general, to certain bivalve species. For example, Vibrio splenus is highly pathogenic to oysters, but not to mussels. Other Vibrio are pathogenic to clams, and so on. So the general problem of infection with epizootics, together with changes in environmental factors, represent a main threat to bivalve population worldwide. In general, we have to consider that shellfish farming is highly vulnerable to epizootics, so to infection with parasites, bacteria, and viruses. So farming practices should be adapted and monitored to guarantee animal health and to avoid the spread of this disease. Despite this, we know that different bivalve population, apart from oysters, die. What do we mean with mortality outbreaks? The observation of high episodes of mortality in a short time. And apparently these mortality outbreaks that can completely kill all the specimens, all the individuals in a plant, is not predictable. So there is epizootic surveillance throughout the year. So the water is generally controlled. The water where the animals are grown is controlled for pathogens, for parasites, and so on. Despite this, and despite in some cases, the absence of environmental stressors, for example, an increase in temperature, different bivalves die. And this implies a great economic loss for the farm. Here you can see that Mytilus edulis and Mytilus galloprovincialis, the mussels, which are considered resistant species, much resistant to environmental stress or pathogens with respect to oysters, have suffered mortality episodes that started in the middle of more or less 2005, and all these episodes for Mytilus edulis and for Mytilus galloprovincialis, this is the mussel for the Mediterranean mussel. This is the mussel we have in the North Sea. As you can see, from about 2050, there's been a steady increase in mortalities as documented by scientific studies. What are the causes? Here is a tentative in this review to establish a relationship between all the possible variables that can affect the mortality of Mytilus edulis and Mytilus galloprovincialis. What are the variables? The type of site, the climate condition, the seawater quality, the presence of pollutants, the presence of pathogens, or the aquaculture practice. And you can see that in most cases, there is no synergy among the factors. we could observe here, for example, a synergy with site and practice for Mytilus, but in general, there is no apparent relationship between seawater quality or whatever. So it's very difficult to predict massive mortalities of bivalves in Europe and all over the world. This is a problem because this is the decline of mussel aquaculture in European Union. Once we knew that oysters were vulnerable to pollution, climate changes, pathogens, but mussels have been considered for a long time a resilient species. So there was no problem in mussel cultivation. And as you can see from the first graphs I show you, Mytilus is one of the main species for both production in tons and also for economic value. But look at this. In the rest of the world, the production of mussels is steadily increasing, and in Europe is steady, is not growing. And this is due to different problems. In this analysis, they tried to grade the positive and negative aspects of different variables for that could affect mussel aquaculture in Europe. Of course, we'll not go through the detail, but many of these weak and strong points are those that we have mentioned so far. The problem is that once there was no concern about mussel aquaculture, but now mussel aquaculture is one of the most controlled aquaculture type in Europe because of this incredible decline during the last year. Another additional stress related directly to climate change that can affect bivalve population are marine heat waves. What is a heat wave? As I told you before, is in sudden increase in temperature over the average value, and this can apply to air, to water, whatever. Marine heat waves are extended period of a regional ocean warming. Okay, in a short time there is a great increase in temperature for a few hours, but the increase in temperature can be so high with respect to normal temperature for that season in that place that can lead to animal mortalities. All animals, of course, a fish can move, but bivalves and other sessile invertebrates of the macrobenthos cannot move. So they are exposed to this sudden increase in temperature. Here is an example of temperature changes across the year from February to November. These are the minimum and maximum temperature, and here are the peaks of heat waves that are increasing temperature well over the average temperature of the field. The problem is for those animals that live in the tidal zone, because many aquaculture farms, not in the Mediterranean, but at higher latitudes in Europe, are subjected to strong tidal waves. And during the low tide, the animals can be exposed to air. But if the temperature is very high, that can lead to mass mortalities. There are pictures of mortality episodes involving bivalves or other organisms. Billion sea creatures cooked to death due to heat wave in the Pacific Northwest. The same in Spain. Because in these conditions, especially in the spring, summer, during the low tide, the air temperature can reach up to 50 degrees. And of course, animals die. They cannot escape because they cannot move. So since the heat waves are becoming more frequent and intense in the recent years, researchers now focus on how to understand the welfare of these species and to understand how resilient they can be to sudden temperature increase, if it can acclimate, that is, to adapt to increasing frequencies of high temperatures, to see if there are populations that can resist them, so can be selected for aquaculture, whereas other populations are more vulnerable and so cannot be chosen, also on the basis of their genetic background for aquaculture. So there is a lot of experimentation in the lab, trying to simulate different heat waves at different temperatures. For example, here, 50 degrees for 6 hours, 40 degrees for 6 hours for animals that in the summer were in a temperature of about 27 degrees. And in this simulation, we can follow of course, the survival of the mussel or the clams or whatever bivalve we are focusing on, and to study the molecular, functional, and physiological responses to the heat wave. And in this way, we can understand the mechanism that can lead these animals to adapt to these ongoing climate changes, to adapt to the increase in frequencies of heat waves, to adapt to the higher values of temperature during extreme temperature events. So again, we go back to the fact that the research is fundamental to understand animal welfare, their adaptation to the environment, their capacity to fight potential pathogens, and so on, in any environmental condition, and of course, in aquaculture. So the take-home message here is very simple. Welfare of fish and shellfish species depends on several abiotic factors as well by aquaculture practice. And if on one end, for the main species of aquaculture fish in Europe at least, we have a regulation based on scientific data that can help us to reduce the risk of affecting animal health during growth and also during pre-slaughtering and slaughtering. For shellfish, and in particular for bivalves, the climate change and vulnerability to different types of epizootics, bacteria, viruses, and protozoans represent the main threats to survival and health. So again, here research is still needed to understand how the most aquaculture bivalve species can react, can respond to different stressors, epizootics, climate changes, pollution, or whatever, in order to protect them and to avoid the mortality episodes that are affecting bivalve aquaculture worldwide. I think that it's enough for this time. I think we will see next year. There will be probably another course, so we will go through the methods to evaluate scientifically the health status of fish and shellfish. But for now, I'm finished. So I'm open to questions anytime.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I just show my screen now, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this lesson, and my name is Raffaella Boggia. I am a food chemist, and with my research group, we are working in the Department of Pharmacy at the University of Genoa. The topic of this lesson is the sustainable food ingredients and the so-called nutraceuticals coming or potentially coming from food side streams. With these terms, we intended as the biomasses which are unavoidable residual outputs that usually remain unused and which usually have to be disposed of at high cost. On this slide, you can see the outline of this lesson. First, I would like to briefly talk about the context of this topic, trying to answer the question why we care on this topic. Second, I would like to introduce the concept of upcycling food, which means taking leftovers and converting them to produce alternative or novel ingredients with high added values, what is also referred in papers and in some scientific documents as bioproducts to value products. Trying, in this case, in this second case, to answer the question, what are we talking about? In the last part of the lesson, we will try to provide you some case studies. And Federica Torrini, my colleague, will introduce you a lot of case studies we have investigated in our lab. In particular, a special focus will be made on fishery side streams, as we are actively participating in the research activities of eco-efficient projects. So let me start with the context, with the background of this lesson, and speaking about what probably all of you well known, that growing global population is expecting to reach about 10 billion by 2050, resulting in the search for a healthy lifestyle and appropriate meals to retain good health, as well as resulting in increasing demand for a nutritious and sustainable food supply. With less than a few years left to reach the Sustainable Development Goals, much still must be done to improve the way we produce and consume food. We have to work to achieve global commitments, making our food system able to safeguard our health and the ecosystem by delivering affordable diets to everyone, everywhere, and possible at all times. In line with this approach, the double health and climate pyramid has been developed as a guideline for daily food choices that are healthy for humans and more sustainable for the planet, showing that the food we should consume more frequently for our health are generally also the ones with a low climate impact. On the contrary, the production of animal foodstuffs and factory farming are associated with major negative impacts on the environment and the human health. These reasons lead to the search for sustainable food alternatives by focusing on the preservation of wasted nutrients within the food chain, paying particular attention to proteins, and always respecting the principle of sustainable circular economy. In other words, the efforts we will have to make are aimed at achieving what is generally summarized with the concept of One Health, an integrated, unifying approach to balance and optimize the health of people, animals, and the environment. So we can, easily understand as one of the main challenges is proper the development of a sustainable solution for the management of a food industry side streams. In fact, it is estimated that roughly 1/3 of the edible parts of food produced for human consumption get lost or wasted globally, corresponding to about 1.6 billion tons per year, involving byproducts such as bagasse, peels, stems, shells, seeds, bones, skin, scales, and so on, as well as whole preparations threshed for not meeting the commercialization quality criteria, ripeness, size, color, odor, etc. All these biomasses need to be managed and disposed with a loss of about 2 trillion euros, and this data is expecting to increase within next years. However, if correctly managed, several nutrients and bioactive compounds can be still extracted from different food industrial side streams. Turning them into high added value products drastically reduce social, economic, and environmental impacts due to their disposal or incineration. Indeed, food side streams minimization, together with the possibility of bioactives recovery and their modification through green methodologies, can represent an attractive opportunity, not only for the development of new food ingredients, but also for nutraceutical, cosmetic, textile, and pharmaceutical sectors, among others. So it is, mandatory to manage food side streams. In my lesson and in the slides that I am showing you, sometimes you will find this kind of sign, the attention sign, because when the sign, will appear, is just to remind you that it's quite important to develop and possible to study and to investigate this topic, because they are sort of hot topics. So another question is where are food side streams generated? Because you know that we can, in a certain way, try to, schematize the food chain and in different steps. And so this is an example, and it's quite a general example. And production, storage, processing, distribution, retail, food service, consumption is typical steps of a typical food supply chain. In the first steps of this scheme, usually the 30% of food is wasted. The others about the 60%. So many strategies can or could be applied from improving the efficiency of all these steps to the recovery of food, in example for charity, feeding, composting, and so on. So the topic of this lesson is about the valorization of these food side streams, possibly not only recycling them, but adding value to them, the so-called upcycling, making food side streams a new resource for food sectors, but also, as I said before, for other sectors. Now, I would like to, explain what is the, example we are talking about in the context of a coefficient project, and in particular, what is a fishery side streams. Because, I would like to give an example of what we manage every day in our laboratory. And precisely about, in this case, we are talking about two different types of fishery side streams. The first one that you can see in this part of the slides concerns about wallfish coming from, example, unwanted catches, bycatches, or undersized catches. As you know, when you are fishing, you can catch also something that you don't want, or something that consumers don't want, because the size, because the kind of fish is not what we are expecting to. The second kind of fishery side stream is different and is typical of, for example, industry, which is involved in preparation of some fishery products. for example, an industry which is involved in the canning process. For example, canned tuna as a typical product, or for example, filleting to produce fish fillets in order to prepare a ready to consume food to distribute in supermarkets or in the shops. So we have two different kinds of fisheries side streams, but in any case, we have a very peculiar biomasses, because this kind of biomasses is very, very perishable. This is because, as you can see, this solid fish waste is a very heterogeneous biomass, that it is potentially dangerous if untreated in fish farms and post-harvest systems. The fish leftovers, such as bones, head, skin, scales, fin, tails, gut, and viscera, occur in variable proportion according to the kind of fish and the kind of process. Given that these fractions rich in organic content are dumped in landfills, environmental threats associated with land and water contamination become a matter of concern. With its nutrient-dense composition, improper handling and storage practices can rapidly deteriorate fish quality, making them unfit both for consumption, but both for further processes like upcycling. This includes their exposure to unacceptable duration of high temperature, poor infrastructure, and the reliance on certain traditional post-harvest fish processing methods that are associated with high levels of wastage and environmentally unsustainable. Thus, recovering valuable components before disposal become the prime target in solid waste management. However, even though fisheries side streams represent a valuable resource consisting of many high-value components, such as bioactive peptides, collagen, chitin, or enzymes, we speak about them in a few minutes, it commonly uses to produce fish meals, fertilizers, and fish oils, or serves as direct feed in aquaculture. One of the bottlenecks in the flow chart to valorize them is their sorting, and for this reason, many efforts in eco-efficient projects are devoted to use unsorted biomasses. But in any case, it is mandatory to block degradation and spoilage using a stabilization step. As I mentioned before, this is a very perishable material. In this next slide, you can see a general flow chart resumed in a research paper I cited here, suitable for food side streams in general, with, in this case, another special focus not on animal but on plant-based foods. In any case, many of these steps are common, and the pretreatment, which I sign with this, sort of red square or red rectangle, is quite important and has to be declined according the kind of biomasses you have to manage. So the first requirement is, according to the material, milling, grinding, or in any cases, try to block any kind of chemical or microbiological degradation. So, for example, coming back to the example of a fishery side stream, cleaning, sorting, cutting or grinding, and making something to stabilize this product. for example, dehydration, but not only. There are some, methods to stop any kind of degradation. As you can see, sorting is highlighted. Is highlighted because this is a very important step, and as I mentioned before, in a coefficient project, we are trying to avoid this because this sorting is really expensive and sometimes is unaffordable for some, stakeholders. So in scientific papers, but also in industrial processes, you can see some tables like this one, in which you can realize that if you are particularly interested in some application and in some bioactives, you have to sort and to separate the skin from muscle, from belly part, from scales, from viscera and head and skin. And as I mentioned before, this is a very heavy step. So, I think, have understood which is the background of this lesson, please let me go to the next or the second topic. That is, to try to explain this concept of recycled food or recycled ingredients. An old concept in some way, but to be implemented in today's industrial food system. Sometimes we, forget some golden rules that probably our grandfather and grandmother tried to teach us, but the usual food system, obliged us to forget some golden rules. And obviously, we have to decline these golden rules in a food industrial supply chain. So, which is, what is the definition of this concept, the upcycling food or upcycled ingredients, that could be different according to different point of view. For example, for researchers, for food manufacturers, for stakeholders. So we have also to work about policy and regulation development because otherwise much of the research carried out in this field can become feasible or not in practice. In other words, upcycled food is sometimes allowed and sometimes is not allowed yet. Then we would like to defining a sort of waste management hierarchy from most to least favorable action, and obviously the communication and public acceptability of these upcycled ingredients or foods must be investigated and must be considered because, as you can imagine, this public acceptability is the last step for this kind of products. So please let me show this next slide in which I would like to show you an example of upcycled food. In this case, we have, an example of upcycled food constituting through alternative use. In this case, we have probably, chickpeas, and, then to cook chickpeas, you have to add water. And this water that you produce during the cooking of chickpeas, also at home, is now called aquafaba. So aquafaba is a sort of example of an alternative use of what is usually waste. In fact, when we cook chickpeas, usually we waste the water and we don't use this kind of product that we can call byproduct. But this aquafaba is quite popular for vegans. In fact, they use it to replace fat and to replace thicker agents in order to prepare some dishes and some preparations like those that are, shown in this slide. So this is, an example, and but we can have another kind of, not alternative use, but in this case we have novel use. This is, an example of what we are speaking about before, so fishes, and what is called fisheries side streams, heads, bones, and scales, viscera, and so on. And our efforts, also inside the Coefficient Project, is to try to, recover this kind of bioactives and, give them a novel use as food ingredients, as nutraceuticals. But obviously, we have another sign here, another, attention sign, because policy and regulation must be considered, because sometimes we can have a sort of novel food, and in a few minutes we will speak about this kind of definition, understanding which are the, all the possible consequences in the use of these products. So let me give you some definitions in order to be sure that everybody, is has a sort of background knowledge of this topic. So, as you know, bioactive ingredients sometimes are the ingredients that we can find in products like food supplements. What's a food supplement? Food supplements are a concentrated source of nutrients, sometimes for example, vitamins food supplements, or mineral food supplements, or protein food supplements, or other substances with a nutritional or physiological effect that are marketed in those forms. What we also called like a drug, but they are not a drug, they are food, and are, pills, tablets, capsules, liquids in measured doses. But they are, concentrated sources of nutrients or other physiological bioactive substances, but not drugs. A wide range of nutrients and other ingredients might be present in food supplements, included but not limited to vitamins, minerals, amino acids, essential fatty acids, fiber, or various plants and herbal extracts. It's important also to say that food supplements have a regulation, a European regulation, which is also, converted in case of Italy, Italian regulation, and they are well defined. Sometimes there are another definition that is very important to know in this context, that is novel food definition. When I just mentioned novel use before, sometimes sometimes it's important to recognize that we can face novel food regulation. Because, as you know, under UA regulation, any food that was not consumed significantly prior to a particular date, that is May 1997, is considered to be a novel food. And so it must be authorized. Otherwise, it's not possible to commercialize it. And so, even if your research is really good and your results are, outstanding, you cannot commercialize your products. Then there are another important concept that I would like to remind you. That is health claims, and in particular, health claims regulation. Sometimes we are speaking about some special foods with some, attributes that go behind the nutritional value. In this case, some foods have claims. Sometimes they are nutritional claims, low fat or high proteins, high level of vitamins. But sometimes they have a stronger, claim, something like a health claim. A statement advertising that the product has some particular health benefits. Also, in this case, you cannot say what you want. You cannot, have a label in which you can write a message that is not ruled. And so it's really important to know that also for these health claims and also for nutritional claims, you have a regulation, and so you have to respect it. And this is important because sometimes, as in this lesson, we are speaking about nutraceuticals. And nutraceuticals are ingredients, food ingredients also in this context, that have extra health benefits in addition to the basic nutritional value found in foods. So they are compounds that are able to give you some good, positive help in your healthy status, but they are not drug, but they are not a food recognized category. So in this case, differently from these other cases, you have no rules. So in this case, regulation is still lacking, and you can speak about concepts of nutraceuticals, but they are not defined by rules. So this is important to know. So we speak about nutraceutical, but then if we want, to use them, we have to understand which kind of targets we decided to have. For example, we have extracted nutraceuticals that are approved for their use in Europe, and so we decided to concentrate them and to produce a food supplement. Or you have a nutraceutical, but you are in this second category, and so you have to control if they are approved or not. Because if they are approved because they are old ingredients, or they are approved novel foods or novel ingredients, okay. Otherwise, you have to manage to authorize your new nutraceutical. Then you have to manage with health claim regulation, because you have to be sure that what you are, trying to assess the bioactivity that you are trying to assess for your compounds has an health claim which is already regulated. In this slide, then, I would like to show you some examples in which we, in our lab, have tried to extract this kind of compounds called nutraceuticals, like fibers, polyphenols, hydrolyzed peptides, omega-3 fatty acids, minerals, and so on, from food side streams and concentrated them, for example, in order to design dietary supplements, or in order, to be added to some foods in order to prepare an enriched food or to prepare a sort of food with claims that we also can call functional foods. Another example of compounds that can be extracted from food side streams are food additives. Food additives, are ruled. We have an European regulation that define them. I just would like to remember you that they are substances added intentionally to foodstuff to perform certain technological function, for example, to color, to sweeten, or to thicker, or to preserve, or to emulsify some foods. Also, in this case, we have to pay attention to policy and regulation. So, coming back to upcycled food, that are food that we have already defined, food with an alternative use, sort of bioproducts that we have recovered and we have decided to recycle for alternative use or for novel use. In this case, obviously, we have to follow a sort of hierarchy. This is because food supply chain has a lot of waste, has a lot of side streams, but the first topic that we must follow is to prevent them, is not to produce a lot of these food side streams. Then the second most preferable option is to reuse surplus of food if it's possible. And so, for example, to donate them and to use them for human consumption. Otherwise, we have to think about another kind of destination like animal feed. But if succeed in upcycle our food production, our food side streams, we can put them, in the middle of redistribution and animal feed reuse. So differently for this kind of pyramid, which is the pyramid that you can find in many government sites, in this case, not a recycle, but an upcycle. So in this case, we can upcycle some bioactives and use them just, under the redistribution step. Obviously, we have to communicate this kind of positive aspects in order to improve public acceptability. In a lot of strategies can be followed, like low price, some communication on the label, and something like that. So I think that we have understand why we are speaking about this topic and why what is a food an upcycled food ingredient. And now let me go briefly in a practical example. In this case, we are speaking about fishery-side streams, and fishery-side streams, as I mentioned before, is a lot, a big amount of biomasses. Obviously, we know that in our country, in Europe, also the major part of the fish is processed before being sold to final consumer. And obviously, this generated a lot of side streams, from 20 to 80%. And obviously, it depends on the kind of fish, on the kind of process. But as you can see, you produce also a lot of unwanted catches, as I mentioned before. And all this kind of side streams, you know, can be estimated to reach the 30–35% of global fish production. So it's mandatory to use them, and it's mandatory to pre-treat them in order to stabilize. In many cases, sorting is an avoidable step, but many research projects like Coefficient are working in order to avoid this step. And now let me go through the bioactives that we can recover from this kind of food side streams. In particular, I would like to speak about proteins and peptides. Above all, what is the typical protein of this kind of biomasses is collagen. Collagen, as you know, is one of the most important proteins, above all in skin and in the bones of fishes, but also in jellyfish, in sponges, and in other marine sources. Then collagen can also sometimes be called gelatin when the structure of this native protein is partially destroyed. In this case, obviously, we are called about gelatin. And also, we often called about another kind of bioactives that are called hydrolyzed collagen or gelatin peptides. So, gelatin is a water-soluble biopolymer, usually, as I mentioned before, obtained by denaturation of collagen, which is present only in animals. In particular, nowadays, commercial gelatin mostly derives from bovine and porcine discards. And, but gelatin demands is increasing. Is increasing because, unlike the bovine one, marine gelatin does not present problematic limitations linked to, for example, BSE, bovine spongiform encephalopathy, foot and mouth disease, or religious constraints. So, fish gelatin is considered a valid alternative to the terrestrial ones. Nevertheless, it has to be considered that fish gelatin usually contains less quantity of typical amino acids like proline and hydroxyproline compared to mammalian gelatin, with consequences in physiochemical and functional properties, such as gel strength, viscosity, and melting point. In addition to the type of the starting material, extractive conditions can affect the properties of gelatin too. So collagen and gelatin, I said, I again would like to remind that collagen is the native protein and gelatin is the denaturated collagen status, are very, very used not only in food sectors, but also in many other sectors, like, for example, biomaterials, like packaging. And so this kind of bioactives are, quite important to be recovered. Then we have what we usually call the hydrolyzed collagen or gelatin peptides. They are something that derived from collagen and gelatin because, as shown in this part of the slide, the triple helix typical of collagen, the denaturation typical in gelatin, and then we can, hydrolyze from a chemical point of view or using enzymes, hydrolyze these proteins and obtain small molecules, small peptides. These small peptides are very useful for other kind of uses because a lot of them have some important bioactivities. For example, some of them are characterized by anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, or other important bioactivities that can be, and are also not only can, they are exploited in many sectors, like food supplement sectors I mentioned before. So this is a very precious bioactives that you can extract from fishery side streams. Another kind of bioactives are the lipid fraction, and you know that fish contains between 2 to 30% of fat. It depends on the kind of fish. So we can have very low content of fat in some fishes, but you can have a very high content of fat in other fishes. That are located in muscle tissues, heads, bones, fins, tail, skin, and above all in viscera. Beyond the well-known positive effects of semi-essential fatty acids of omega-3 series, such as EPA, EPA, or DHA, I would like to remember that these compounds, as you can see in the structures, are quite unstable because they are, as you can see, there are a lot of unsaturations. And this kind of unsaturation are considered like weak points of these molecules because they can very easily be oxidized. And so when you try to recover this kind of fraction, you have to pay attention to oxidation, and you have to monitor this kind of process that could, negatively affect your final product. So what we are saying is that during your extraction, you have to be clear what you want to extract. you have to be clear that different kind of biomasses can contain different kind of bioactives. For example, proteins, for example, lipids, for example, another kind of marine source like shrimps contain a lot of chitin, another important biopolymer that could be used in many applications and in many various industrial sectors. But in all cases, you have to pay attention to the quality of this kind of bioactives. And, for example, I just mentioned oxidation for lipids, but also you have to pay attention of the concentration of some contaminants, some hazardous substances that could be concentrated during the extraction process. And so each step must be monitored in this sense. And it's important to check both the quality and both also the purity of your compounds. These are other examples of bioactives like pigment. Astaxanthin is a typical colorant that you can find in some particular fishes like salmon on crustaceans, and minerals like calcium, phosphorus, zinc, and iron that could be used in a lot of sectors. So, just to resume, we have, to remind that you have a very perishable biomass, that stabilization is mandatory. Then you have to, extract what you want, possibly trying to use a sort of cascade process, because it's very convenient to try, to extract more than one bioactive possible in the same flow chart, but without forgetting that each step has to be monitored in terms of quality and in terms of contaminants. So for this last part of the extraction, that is the core of the process, obviously we have to follow all the principles that a good green extraction has to follow. Because, as you know, there are also a lot of traditional methods to extract this kind of bioactives, because fatty acids are not a novel ingredient, also gelatin, also peptides. But a lot of very used extraction methods are still using traditional procedures. In this kind of traditional procedures, obviously we have environmental concerns and also economical concerns. So an important topic in this kind of flow chart is to replace traditional methods with innovative ones. In particular, green extraction, and in particular, following these 6 principles that I would like to remember Professor Chemin and Professor Cravotto wrote in a lot of outstanding scientific papers. And if you are interested in this topic, I invited you in reading this kind of scientific papers in order to understand these 6 principles that is important to follow to have a real green extraction. For example, just to have, you know, a quick overview of these principles, the first one is not to try to over-exploit natural resources, because, for example, if I try to overuse a particular kind of plant or a particular kind of animals, probably I will have a loss of biodiversity. So I have to pay attention to my biomasses that are really a sort of surplus, a sort of excedence. And for example, fishery leftover is an example. Insects are other examples, but also, you know, substances that in a very innovative ways, some scientists are trying to extract using, for example, biotechnologies. Then the second principle is to use alternative solvents and possibly using just water or not solvent at all. Because as you can imagine, some extraction in a traditional way use what we call the traditional solvents that are very environmentally impacting and sometimes also toxic for operators. And so it is really important to replace this kind of solvents with or just water or food grade solvents, or possibly without using solvents at all, as I mentioned before. But how we can do that? We can do that in sometimes in using innovative solution, not only changing solvents, but also changing the extraction techniques. And for example, I am sure you have already seen in other lessons this kind of innovative processes like ultrasounds, microwaves, or subcritical fluids and something like that. This is obviously of help when we decided to change solvents or when we decided not to use solvents at all. And then they are quite useful also in reduced time of extraction. And obviously, they are important also to save energy at last, to save costs. Then another principle of a real green extraction procedure is that during your extraction flow chart, not only to perform a cascade flow chart, as I mentioned before, trying to extract more than one product in the same process, but also without producing real waste. Otherwise, your process will generate other wastes that then you have to dispose. So the best practice is to produce co-product and not waste, reminding that co-product is different for byproduct for waste. And this is the definition. Co-product is the material, intentional or inevitable, created during a single manufacturing process and at the same time as the main product. The main final product and co-product must always meet specification for their characteristic, quality, for example, and each may be used directly for a particular application. Then, this is one of my favorite principles, because in the past, in the very, you know, a lot of times ago, I started my university careers in a chemometricians group, And I learned that chemometrics is very useful in all your experiments. And above all, it is very useful in this kind of topic, because as you can imagine, you have a lot of variables to fix and a lot of variables to optimize, because you have to improve the yield of extraction, the quality and the purity of your extracts. But at the same time, you have to save time, to save number of operation steps, to save energy, to save environmental impacts like waste that I have already mentioned. You have to pay attention to economical costs, to solvent, and so you have to consider a multivariate system. And so you can optimize a multivariate system just using multivariate techniques like chemometrics. And in this case, multivariate experimental design is one of the most convenient, methods that you can use. Finally, it's important to consider the life cycle assessment. I know that if your process is good, if your bioactive are, the best one, your steps have been optimized by multivariate design. But if at the end this kind of analysis is not performed, is not considered, you probably could have a process that is not convenient. It's not convenient from an economical and from an environmental point of view. So let me conclude this lesson speaking about these targets that I just mentioned before. And this is, what we are just, I have just explained in the previous slides, but resumed in a sort of schematic view. And in this case, I would like to show you some results that we have obtained managing this kind of biomasses. This is a scientific paper just published last year, and this is another one. The first is focused on gelatin and on hydrolyzed gelatin peptides. The second one is focused on collagen. But in both cases, we tried to use innovative techniques and possibly a sort of cascade flow chart to cover more than one product in the same process. So I would like to thank you, and please, I am able for your questions. Just before to leave the floor to my colleague Federica Turrini, who will show you other examples of case study about bioactives extracted from other kind of food side streams. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. First of all, let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Federica Turrini, and I am a researcher in food chemistry. I am part of the food chemistry research group headed by Professor Boggia at the Department of Pharmacy of the University of Genoa. And in this second part of the lesson, we continue talking about sustainable food ingredients and nutraceutics from food side streams. Particularly, we try to answer the question how. So how we can manage to obtain from food byproducts potentially new high-value ingredients. One of the main topics of the research activity of my research group is the valorization of agro-food waste and fishery side streams through green technologies, namely innovative extraction techniques with low environmental impact according to green chemistry and to the principle of green extraction with a view to circular economic development. These technologies allow to recover bioactive compounds with high added value, which could be formulated and then potentially exploit in different fields as new ingredients or products. An example, nutraceuticals or dietary food supplements, cosmetics, or in biomaterial applications. In this slide, I wanted to summarize some of the food matrices, both of vegetal and animal origin, which have represented or represented the side streams on which we are working, obviously in collaboration with other research groups or companies in the field, or which are supported by funded European projects. I want to mention fruit waste and in particular those resulting from the fruit juice supply chain. Moreover, the byproducts of chestnut cultivation, herbal food supplements, pigmented rice, and vegetable oils. Up to the most recent topic concerning animal products and in particular the fishery side streams, which represent the starting point of the Horizon 2020 Eco-efficient project. There are two main case studies that I want to report on. The first concerns pomegranate fruit, which today has gained widespread popularity as a functional food and nutraceutical source due to its high content in bioactive compounds. The second one regards bud derivatives, a particular type of botanicals which are marketed in the European community as herbal-based food supplements. Let's begin talking about pomegranate fruit. And in this presentation, I'd like to answer to the questions reported in this slide, namely what is pomegranate, how is it from a botanic point of view, what's inside, so what kind of bioactive compounds or nutraceutical compounds does it contain, and at the end why it could be an eco-sustainable solution. Pomegranate, whose scientific name is Punica granatum, is one of the oldest edible fruits quoted since the dawn of civilization and very appreciated by consumers due to its high quality attributes. It is an ancient perennial plant species of the Lythraceae family. It was mentioned in the Bible, the Quran, and in Egyptian texts. And the first pomegranate crops date back to 3000, 4000 before Christ. A plurality of symbolic meanings have been attributed to it, in example, fertility, prosperity, immortality, and it was used as a food, as an ornament, and in the folk medicine of many cultures as an healing food due to its beneficial effects on the human health. Pomegranate presents a very wide global geographical distribution, reflecting its easy adaptation to different climate conditions. Native to the Middle East and North Africa, today it is spread globally due to its high longevity, drought and salinity resistance, and resilience and adaptability to climatic changes. In particular, pomegranate is widely cultivated in 5 continents, especially in Iran, India, China, and in Mediterranean countries such as Spain, Turkey, Egypt, Morocco, and Tunisia. In Italy, this resilient and rustic crop recently has shown a growing diffusion, especially in central and southern areas, in response to increasing market demand for pomegranate and at the same time with the aim of valorizing marginal land facing climatic changes. From a botanical point of view, the pomegranate is a non-climateric fruit and should be harvested when fully ripe, generally 5-6 months after the appearance of blossoms. During pomegranate fruit ripening, physiological, biochemical, and structural processes occur with changes in size, color, and flavor that make the fruit acceptable for human consumption. This fruit is categorized as a big berry named Balausta. Its diameter ranges from 5 to 12 centimeters, and the shape can be round, oval, and the external peels could be of variable thickness and color, which vary from yellowish green or deep pink, red, or even black, depending on the cultivar. The different parts that make up the fruit are the coriaceous and the woody hexocarp, the mesocarp or albedo, which constitutes the spongy tissue inside the hexocarp, the endocarp, which represents the internal membranes of the fruit that surround the edible portion of the fruit, which consists of areoles containing juicy episperm and seeds containing the lipidic fraction. As regards the chemical composition of the fruit in macro and micronutrients, we can say that it is an excellent source of dietary fiber and health-promoting nutrients. It is important to highlight that the chemical composition of the fruit differs depending on the cultivar, the growing region, the maturity, the cultivation practice, the climate and storage conditions. So the reported data referring to 100 grams of edible portion of pomegranate belong to the cultivar Wonderful, which is one of the most widespread commercial pomegranate cultivars in virtue of their soft seeds and welcome organoleptic features. Fresh pomegranate contains a significant amount of micronutrients such as vitamins and minerals. In particular, vitamin C and potassium are the most abundant among vitamins and inorganic elements respectively. Its content in bioactive compounds is really interesting. Pomegranate phytocomplex is composed of more than 150 different phytochemicals, above all polyphenols, mainly responsible for its healthy properties. Polyphenols such as anthocyanins, which are the colored pigments responsible for the characteristic coloring of the fruit and the corresponding juice, and then tannins, flavonoids, phenolic acids are the major bioactive molecules present in pomegranate fruit. Therefore, this fruit is considered the source of natural multifunctional agents that exert simultaneously antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, anti-tumor, anti-diabetic, cardiovascular, and neuroprotective activities. Ellagic acid in its free form or in the form of ellagitannins is considered the main phenolic compounds responsible for the numerous health properties of pomegranate and is mainly concentrated in the peels with respect to the juice. Ellagitannins are an important class of natural polyphenols classified as hydrolysable tannins, which are from a chemical point of view esters of hydroxydiphenolic acid and gallic acid with sugar residues, predominantly glucose. Tannins have been considered as anti-nutrient for a long time due to their poor bioavailability. However, ellagic acid released from ellagic tannins in the gastrointestinal tract is partially absorbed and further metabolized by the gut microbiota to urotins, which are regarded as the main active compounds with various bioactivity in vivo. As for the bioactive compounds in question, the different parts of pomegranate fruit and plant have a characteristic content of nutritional and bioactive compounds. Despite its known properties, it was for a long time a forgotten fruit and relegated to ornamental use. Many centuries later, the health-promoting properties of pomegranate have been confirmed in the scientific and medical research, and pomegranate has become a functional fruit. Today, it is considered a superfood because it is an excellent source of nutraceuticals. It is in fact considered one of the 100 richest dietary sources of polyphenols according to the Phenol Explorer database. In recent decades, pomegranate has been the subject of numerous scientific studies which have demonstrated its beneficial effects on human health by virtue of its heritage of compounds with an antioxidant activity. So, in addition to its nutritional value, ornamental and health-promoting value, it presents an high consumption and industrial value to the growing interest of consumers. In the last decades, the consumer demand for health-promoting functional foods has increased. At the same time, eco-sustainability has become a prerequisite, influencing consumer perception of food quality. Ideally, to answer the market request, functional food should be able to provide health benefits, of course, but at the same time, it should be good, minimally processed, and possibly environmentally sustainable. The world surface dedicated to the cultivation of pomegranate is more than 300,000 hectares, and the annually world production is probably higher than 3 million tons. The main world's production countries are India and Iran, where more than 75% of the world production is being produced. The juicy areas represent the most commercially exploitable part of the fruit. So, pomegranate juice is the main industrial product obtained from this fruit. In addition to the direct consumption, fresh areas marketed as ready-to-eat products and pomegranate seed oil have also recently gained an important industrial relevance. And regarding oil fraction, the major fatty acid was punicic acid, which is a polyunsaturated fatty acid with pre-conjugated double bonds, chemically similar to the conjugated linoleic acid. One drawback in pomegranate juice industrial production is the large amount of waste, since juice represents about only the 30% of the fresh weight, and the large quantities of byproducts are obtained from the industrial production chain of pomegranate juices. It is in fact estimated that 1 ton of fresh fruit generates about 700 kilos of byproducts. So more of the 50% of the fresh fruit weight, depending on the cultivar taken into account, are byproducts. External peels are the most abundant byproducts. representing about the 80% of all residues. Byproducts coming from pomegranate juice processing represent both a challenging, expensive, and not eco-friendly disposal problem, and a promising source of nutraceutical to exploit because, as already mentioned, the nutraceutical properties are not limited to the edible part of the fruit, but are shared by different parts, such as peels and seeds, which contain sometimes higher quantities of biologically active compounds compared to the edible portion of the fruit. For this reason, in the last decades, many researchers have focused on the valorization of pomegranate processing byproducts using innovative and low-impact extraction techniques as green alternatives to conventional extraction methods. Our research group has been dealing with the valorization of pomegranate byproducts for years in collaboration with several companies of the field. In this study, different research lines have been developed. The first study concerns recycling strategy to valorize the squeezed marks of certified pomegranate cultivars. These internal marks obtained after juice processing is represented by endocarp and seed oils residues. And it is usually discarded or used for the oil production due to their lipophilic fraction, although is proven to be a good source of hydrophilic compounds such as polyphenols. So in this study, a comparison was made between different green extraction methods in order to obtain the extracts that were tested in a model food and cosmetic metrics. Particularly, the fresh squeezing marks obtained after juice processing was extracted by ultrasound, used in a pulsed modality and directly by a probe system. Water, which is obviously a basic element of both a greener and safer chemistry approach compared to other organic solvents, was employed alone as the extraction solvent. Ultrasound-assisted extraction is an example of green extraction technology widely used for the extraction of food and natural products, and able to considerably reduce the extraction times and increase the extraction yield. Using ultrasound, full extraction can be completed in minutes with high reproducibility, reducing the consumption of solvent, simplifying manipulation and workup, giving higher purity of the final product, and eliminating post-treatment. How do they work? Ultrasounds are able to mechanically break the cell walls, extracting the intracellular liquids. So the ultrasound waves act on the molecules of liquid medium, namely solvent, by alternating moments of compression and moments of rarefaction on the solvent molecules. These loops of compression and expansion cycles cause the formation of voids or air bubbles that gradually grow until implosion occurs, giving rise to the phenomenon of cavitation. To resume, the obtained extracts come from internal portions of pomegranate, so theoretically still edible, and they are organic solvent-free since only water is used to prepare them, thus making this process sustainable and environmental friendly. But so the aqueous extracts were characterized by several in vitro determination and evaluate their antioxidant properties and phenolic contents and many biological assays. Nevertheless, these aqueous extracts obviously lack long-time stability They should be stabilized and possibly their astringent taste improved or masked. Both these requirements may be addressed by microencapsulation technology. So the microencapsulation technology applied to pomegranate extract allow bioactive ingredients to be physically enveloped in a protective wall material to increase the shelf life of the core components, protecting them from nutritional deterioration and also masking their unpleasant astringency. To stabilize their total polyphenolic content, spray drying microdispersion using pectin as polymeric matrix has been employed to formulate the water-soluble bioactive molecules, and the pectin coming from citrus peels have been chosen as carrier materials since they are another example of compounds recovered from agroindustrial waste, widely used in food production and also potentially obtainable from pomegranate peels in a closed cycle process. The obtained powders presented a good encapsulation efficiency and were able to retain the functional properties of the corresponding liquid extracts. These promising results have stimulated the preparation of a model food ready for consumption, tentatively using one of the formulations as a potential novel ingredient representing a green recycling opportunity for agro-industry. Then, in response to some real problems and always in collaboration with some companies in the sector, we explored different conditions of green extraction of the lagitannins and the lagic acid from the external byproducts of the fruit, namely the peels. Significant recoveries of the lagitannins, free ellagic acid, and radical scavenging compounds were obtained by coupling both the traditional microwave and the hydrodiffusion gravity microwave assisted drying to a direct ultrasound assisted extraction, always using the food grade solvents, in particular hydroalcoholic mixtures. The study is focused on Aqua and Wonderful certified cultivars cultivated in Italy, since they are largely employed in most Western countries to produce pomegranate juices and are often grown together in order to have in the crop season an earlier and a later supply for juice manufacturing. Microwave coupled with ultrasound assisted extraction represent the best compromise to manage these byproducts in terms of extraction efficiency with respect to traditional techniques. So a new fruit-derived ingredient has been formulated with several multifaceted properties. In fact, the chain to quickly recovered bioactive compounds from these major wastes give them a specific nutritional value for their possible nutraceutical employment. The new formulation of pomegranate peel extract obtained by ultrasound assisted extraction and then titrated in both ellagic acid and punicalagin was characterized and then analyzed for potential health properties. Thanks to the active collaboration with the pharmacology research group of the Department of Pharmacy of the University of Genoa, headed by Professor Anna Pittaluga, the new pomegranate ingredient obtained has been tested in vitro and in vivo on mice in order to evaluate their potential healthy activity on neuroinflammation and on different diseases of the central nervous system. Studies are still ongoing, but the data obtained so far provides in vivo and in vitro data to support its nutraceutical properties to be exploited to improve human health and well-being in various neurological patients, providing a proof of concept to propose a potential clinical translation of this new ingredient as a botanical dietary supplement for disease-modifying pharmacological treatments. The second case study we deal with concerns bad derivatives. In recent decades, food supplements have an important impact on the consumer, showing a significant expectation for their health and well-being. They are concentrated sources of nutrients or bioactive compounds, endowed with nutritional or physiological effects, and due to their presumed health benefits, they can supplement the common diet. In particular, the interest in herbal food supplements is exponentially grown, and consequently the relative market has increased in all the world. Botanicals are became among the most popular into the food supplements category due to the general belief which natural is always better, healthier, and safer than synthetic compounds. The use of herbal food supplements as a concentrate form of vegetable extracts increased so much over the past years to count them among the relevant sources of dietetic polyphenols. But derivatives are a relatively new category of botanicals marketed as plant food supplements in the European community. They are conventionally produced by cold maceration of the fresh meristematic tissues of trees and herbaceous plants, in example buds and young sprouts, mainly spontaneously collected. These natural products are already marketed, and a long history of use as dietary supplements for human well-being and health is reported in traditional medicine. They are widely used in chemotherapy, in example, a branch of phytotherapy that exploits the properties of these plant extracts for medicinal purposes. Although both derivatives are a category of botanicals perceived as a new entry in this sector, since they are still poorly studied. But the derivatives are obtained by cold maceration in solvents, following the traditional protocol of glyceric macerates as reported in the European Pharmacopoeia, using a mixture of ethanol and glycerol as extraction solvent. The peculiarity of meristematic tissues in this particular phenological stage concerns their fragile texture and the high content of compounds which constitute the bud phytocomplex. In fact, these substances, including mainly flavonoids, enzymes, plant hormones, vitamins, amino acids, nucleic acids, are often present only in trace in the corresponding adult tissues. But the derivatives represent one of the supply chains investigated in the Finnover project, innovative strategies for the development of cross-border green supply chains. Finnover project is an European Interreg Alcotra Italy-French project, which recently was concluded, whose aim is the green innovation of several agro-industrial chains. Finnover particularly provides support to the green supply chains of the cross-border territory and proposed a technical economic path aimed at the production and use of compounds of natural origin obtained from the biodiversity of the Alcotra territory and usable in the nutraceutical field, therapeutic and phytopharmaceutical field. In particular, the project develops and supports 4 green supply chains. But supply chain, which addresses the valorization of the gemotherapy field, mushrooms supply chain that supports companies aimed at cultivating saprophytic mushrooms for nutrition and therapeutic properties, lavender, which intend to highlight pharmacological, nutraceutical, and biopesticidal properties of this plant, which is a typical crop of the cross-border tradition, and at the end, microorganism, which aims to propose the new natural products that can be used in the sustainable management of crops. With regard to bud derivatives, these are the main topics addressed within the project. First problem it is accidentally confusing the raw material. Fresh buds must be collected generally from spontaneous grown in a very limited period in the late winter and or in the early spring, which corresponds to the annual germination of the plant. And during this period, plants may not show their distinctive features, and sometimes the attribution of the botanical species may be difficult for the collector. Another problem concerns the manufacturing process and the extraction protocols, whose parameters, experimental parameters, are not rigorously defined, and the production rules are often vague and lacking. Then, studies have been carried out on production techniques with the aim of increasing production yield, on the valorization of the corresponding byproducts, and at the end, on the pharmacological health aspects of the mechanism of action of these products. A protocol has been developed to evaluate the authenticity of these products, which, as I mentioned previously, derive from vegetable raw materials obtained from spontaneous harvesting, providing companies that operate seriously in this sector with a defense tool on the market from similar low-quality products or even non-authentic products. In this regard, it is good to remember that in addition to the wrong attribution of the botanical species, which is difficult if not carried out by an expert collector, can be associated with an incorrect identification of the phenological bud stage, which lasts only few days. The evaluation of the authenticity of the bud extracts, both to verify the correctness of the botanical species and the correct phenological stage, was carried out through rapid screen to be transferred directly to the company during the production phase, with non-specific untargeted spectroscopic fingerprint combined with chemometric techniques and consequent confirmation using targeted chromatographic fingerprint. So several data has been published, as reported in the slide, as well as in the project feasibility plan. The polyphenols content of bud derivatives is strongly influenced by the manufacturing processes, whose parameters, as already mentioned, are often not strictly defined, and so thus they affect their final composition. This research aimed to answer to the growing demand for efficient quality control in the bud derivatives field, to guarantee the proper attribution of the botanical source and their content. An innovative extraction protocol with low environmental impact was therefore tested and optimized according to the principle of green chemistry and green extraction through the use of ultrasound as a potential alternative to traditional maceration, with notable saving in terms of time, minutes instead of months, with the same field, chemical and pharmacological identity of the finished products, thus obtaining a substantially equivalent product, but with lower environmental impact and greater economic field. In this research, two different manufacturing processes using two different protocols and many species have been considered as a case study. An untargeted spectroscopic fingerprint of the extract coupled to chemometrics provide a useful tool to identify these botanicals. And the targeted phytochemical fingerprint by HPLC provides the screening of the main bud derivatives, polyphenolic classes, highlighting a high variability depending on both production method and protocol used. In this research, an alternative method to produce ribes nigrum bud derivatives is presented. Particularly, pulse ultrasound assisted extraction using a food grade solvent has been employed and compared to the conventional extraction methods. Also in this case, untargeted polyphenolic fingerprint, so fluorescence UV visible FTIR coupled with chemometrics are employed to quickly screen the best extraction condition evaluated by the design of experiment, and then the polyphenolic fraction of the optimized extract was quantified by targeted chromatographic analysis, and its anti-radical activity was determined. Another topic regards the valorization of byproducts. But derivatives are quite expensive compared to other botanicals, since the phenological stage of buds or young sprouts necessary to obtain them is extremely limited in the time. So their collection is limiting over the time. Consequently, the valorization of their byproducts could have a significant economic impact for the producer, and it could be an important innovation in this field. In this industrial production, starting from buds, we obtained the commercial product, which is the glyceric macerate, after many steps of maceration, filtration, and decanting steps. And together with this, after filtration, remain the bud waste. So, using ultrasound-assisted extraction, we demonstrated that this waste is still rich in bioactive compounds to exploit in different fields. This research describes a novel tool to enable manufacturers of bud extracts to evaluate a sustainable waste management option in order to increase their productivity. Nevertheless, the same strategy could be analogously applied also for other herbal preparations, becoming an example of modus operandi in a green economy strategy. Particularly, Castanea sativa has been used as case study, since this species is one of the most commonly used herbal medicines for its well-known health-promoting properties. And the valorization of bud marks remaining after the production of the glyceric macerate could have significant economic impact for the commercial producers, representing an important innovation in this field. These byproducts prove to be still rich in bioactive compounds, and an alternative to their incineration or composting has been presented in order to obtain high added value products, particularly using the same solvent of the glyceric macerate, so the commercial product. We have allowed to rapidly obtain an extract with promising content in secondary metabolites. Moving on to another supply chain of the project, namely lavender, was explored the innovative use of ultrasound for the recovery of waste from the production of the lavender essential oil. In particular, following the conventional distillation of the essential oil, next to the liquid byproducts such as percolate and hydrolate, which have also been characterized with a VO2 valorization, remain a solid waste. And the remaining solid waste, characterized by the residues of the flowering tops, has been the substrate of subsequent extractions, obtaining extracts that proved to be rich in bioactive compounds, mainly polyphenols and flavonoids, and usable as repellents for aphids or aimed at the production of the cultivated Pleurotus striatus mushroom. I want to conclude this presentation by reporting another food matrix, which is represented by an aromatic Italian variety of colored rice, which grows spontaneously and is called violet nori. The peculiarity of this rice variety is the purple color of all the parts of plant. So not just the caryopsis, but also leaves are purple, and they are rich in polyphenolic compounds, especially anthocyanins. First, in this work, we optimized the extraction condition to obtain anthocyanins and other antioxidant compounds from this matrix. Make also comparison with traditional extraction techniques. We made a comparison between these varieties of violet nori and other commercial cultivars of black rice, highlighting that this variety was very interesting and a very interesting dietetic source of valuable anthocyanins and other antioxidant compounds. In the second step, we made a comparison between the polyphenols compounds of the extracts obtained from the rice, from the corresponding flowers, and from the corresponding leaves, which showed higher content in these bioactive compounds, especially making leaves very interesting for the extraction of these compounds, also on an industrial scale. The analysis of violet nori flower largely confirmed the results obtained for the caryopsis, and so flour is generally obtained from grains which were discarded for their size or their blemishes. In fact, flour largely maintains the treasure of antioxidant molecules, and this result is particularly important since these byproducts of rice processing could be employed not just for the extraction of valuable antioxidant, but also as an ingredient for the production of valuable food products, for example, for celiac disease. My presentation is finished, so I thank you all for your attention, and I leave the floor to all of you if you have some questions. Thank you.